This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everybody. This is an important meeting. This is the last meeting of our fiscal year, and so we're going to be addressing some key issues of what we've done and where we're going and some of the targets. So it should be a lively meeting. I'm calling it to order at 9:04 a.m. Okay, and this is Friday, June 24th, 2022. Let's see, first order of business, do we hear any public comments? No, hearing none, moving on. The next item is the consent agenda, and we have 3 items on this agenda. Let's see, well, first is the meeting minutes. Does anybody want to do any changes to the meeting minutes? Okay. And then we're going to discuss I think we've already discussed it, but the staff recommendations made for projects under $500,000 and no more than in aggregate than $1 million. There are 2 of them. Did we want to talk about that, Brian?
No, the materials are there. Pretty straightforward. Several CPACE transactions, just following our standard underwriting process. So materials are there. If board members have any questions, there's a whole set of documents behind any of those transactions, but we try to keep it all simple and report out. Typically, the under 500,000 and no more in aggregate policy would go to the deployment committee as a report out. But in between them, when we have a board meeting and we want to clear the queue, we run it as a resolution. So that is resolution 2 on the docket. And then resolution number 3 is an extension of the Groton sub-base fuel cell energy project. You know, we've been extending this the past several weeks and making steady progress to pulling that transaction together with our not only fuel cell energy, but also some of the commercial banking partners as well. So hopefully we'll be able to get that wrapped up in July. Those are the 3 resolutions.
Good. So the extension is now what, July 31st?
That's right.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
This is Bettina. I have a question.
Oh, Bettina, sure.
Yeah. I didn't realize we were going to do this as a consent agenda. Are we voting on all 3 at the same time? Because I'd like to abstain from the meeting minutes. I don't know if that mucks things up or not.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah, we could just call each resolution if we wanted to.
Yeah, why don't we do that?
Yeah.
I would prefer that just because I need to abstain from the first one, but
okay.
Thanks.
Good. All right, so do we have any other discussions? Can we, I'll go through all 3 items. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. John Harity.
Thanks, John. Second?
Second, Vicki Hackett.
Thank you, Vicki. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? And abstaining.
Bettina's abstaining.
Okay, thanks, Bettina. And moving on quickly to our second item, do I hear a motion to approve?
Laura, so moved.
Bettina, second.
Thank you, Bettina. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstaining? Okay, and then to our third resolution, do I hear a motion to approve?
Laura, so moved.
Thank you, Laura.
Bettina,
Second?
Bettina,
Thank
second.
Thank you, Bettina. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
So Matt Ranelli joined us. Good morning, Matt.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry to be late.
No,
Oh, hey, Matt.
Morning.
You're good.
Just real quick, so we also included in the materials the progress to targets for IPC through Q3 of fiscal year 2022, ahead of target. And as we wrap up our progress to targets, when we come back to the board in July, you'll see how we're doing. But IPC support of the Green Bank, it was ahead of schedule through Q3, and I suspect will be the same in Q4. And then what we try to do also is just to, on the consent agenda, provide some background on some of the comments we've been providing. We've been doing this, I don't know, for the last 3 to 6 months, just to give you a flavor of some of the things we're responding to. So the DOE revolving loan funds was included in the packet as just an FYI.
Okay.
Excuse me, my computer froze up apparently when we were doing the vote on number 3.
So
Can
do
you
you
hear
want to
me?
be registered in the affirmative, John?
No, I would, ideally, I'd like to discuss it a little bit, and I know the motion has passed. I don't know if there's a way to do it.
Brian, should we, because it's John.
Yeah, what? Yeah, I mean,
He has a history.
yeah. Why don't you just raise the question and we'll talk about it, John? And if we have to revisit the resolution, we can go back. But Bert's on.
Okay, well, so here's the issue, is that a group of workers, a group of 12 workers recently tried to organize at Fuel Cell Energy. And the company fired 4 of them and then refused at first to bargain with the union. They've relented on bargaining, but it's with a 8-person unit instead of the 12-person unit. So there's 4 people that still are out of a job. And I'd like the Green Bank to review like our standards for companies that we deal with in terms of corporate responsibility, because I frankly, we've helped Fuel Cell Energy for years and years and years. I don't feel like helping a union buster. So did you get that?
Yeah. So this
Yeah.
sounds like something that we really need to look at going forward, as opposed to going back and undoing our vote. Because I mean, that vote has been subcommitted and everything else. This sounds like, clearly it's attached to it now, but it feels like a bigger order, because it would really impact everybody we deal with, all the entities we deal with. I don't know, how does anybody else feel about that?
Bonnie, it's Laura.
Hi, Laura.
I understand where John is coming from. However, there are so many other departments that deal with this rather than us, and I think it's philosophical, and it has to be addressed through board policy going forward. The Department of Labor should be the first one that's dealing with this, and I'm sure I would hope that the 4 employees are going through them to make sure that they weren't treated inappropriately. But as far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, Fuel Cell Energy is solely owned and operated and not a quasi of the state. Is that true? Anybody know?
Oh, yeah, I think it is solely owned and operated.
I think we
traded company.
Lonnie, this is Matt. Could I suggest, I agree with Laura and with John. I wonder,
well,
Brian, is this the topic we could put in our discussion? Remember we had the discussion of, I can't remember the euphemism we used, but about certain, just what are our business practices? I'm not saying deciding it one way or another, but maybe the discussion of whether labor complaints, et cetera, are part of that overall assessment we do. Maybe that's a place for this discussion going forward, and we can have not decide it, but discuss it and see if it's appropriate to include it.
Brian, you got that?
I like that because I think it's a way, it's looking at it in a big picture way, as opposed to just incrementally. I think obviously going forward, we're probably going to have, the way life is, a few issues in this arena. So I don't know, how does everybody else feel about that?
And this is Brian, and we could, without getting into the merits of it, I mean, we could always, John, just ask FCE, hey, this was raised at our meeting. Any feedback you'd like to give? Like, without even just the fact that we're asking about it alone and saying goes a long way.
Hi, this is Adrian. I think this has to be dealt with in a policy manner. This is, it's not only some of our borrowers that would be affected, but also the people with whom we have contracts. So it's a pretty broad-based policy that needs to be developed. It can be modeled on the state policy, obviously, but there's a period of inquiry that I think we have to go through before we say how we're going to do and what we're going to do.
This I would just for some kind of historic background, though, we've always been agnostic in our financing as it relates to this, and I would just, as we try to partner with private capital, we don't always want to mirror what the state does.
Hi, it's Laura again. And Lami, I just want to bring back to our memory banks of how, when we're trying to pass legislation or review legislation, how the advocacy groups on either side, multiple, make a lot of statements and then kind of stir the pot to favor the decision in their way. And I feel that if we don't really flush this out totally, we're going to be in this position every single time we award or borrow. And I think, to Brian's point, we should be in the middle. This should not, if we can, it should not matter to us one way or another.
I like that point. So should we do we need a motion to study this going forward, or do we just take it upon ourselves to do that, to kind of look at the big picture and
we could go the formal route of a motion, or we could just take the staff could take the direction of the board to go revisit the issue as a policy and to potentially come forward with.
Term that you mark as
John, you're breaking up.
You're breaking. We lost him.
Yeah,
There you are. John, we missed you there. You broke up.
I'd like to be referred as a no.
A no
Okay.
on item on the third.
I vote no
resolution.
on the motion.
Okay, let's do that.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, I like what Brian said about having the staff move us forward on this.
I'm sorry, I've got a really bad connection.
Okay.
And maybe because of that bad connection, we missed your original no on the original motion, and the minute taker will take that into account.
Okay, so why don't we have the staff take us forward on this? After this meeting, this will be something that we'll start to look at and decide, whether it's our role to remain agnostic or, and I totally agree with Laura. And we've, as legislators, certainly been down this road a million times. It gets stirred up and, all kinds of things happen. And you don't want us to, it's difficult enough, this transition that we're undertaking to try to totally transform the energy industry yet again, the whole energy ecosystem. And we don't want to go dead in the water every single time one of these things pops up. So might be, in terms of Adrienne said, this is kind of a policy objectives of taking a look at it and how we would deal with it and how we would factor it in. that okay with everybody?
Okay with me, it's Laura.
Hi, Laura. Everybody else?
Yeah, that's
Definitely
I think that's a
okay with
good
me.
approach. Yeah.
Okay,
Aye.
good. All right, so moving on to item number 4. We were sort of getting into that. And I think we're going to talk about, it's sort of a review of the results of the 2022 legislative session, and with respect to Public Act 2225, the Connecticut Clean Air Act. Brian Farnham?
Sure, and we could, yeah, perfect. So it was a pretty successful legislative session. So that's a good thing to always be able to report out. We were really excited. So a few new acts and laws going into place that I'd like to talk about. One is we had some revisions to our CPACE legislation, which basically is going to enable some of our infrastructure and climate resiliency work and our EV charger projects to be able to be financed under CPACE. The hiccup here really related to our savings to investment ratio. So by way of background, our CPACE building projects, they're designed so that the estimated energy cost savings over the effective useful life of the improvement exceeds the financing amount. So the, i.e., like the savings to investment ratio is greater than 1. So obviously when you're doing things with EV charging stations and climate resilience, this SIR test doesn't really apply to them because there's not an energy savings. There is a savings, but it's a different type of savings. So we've got that exempted so that we could do financings in that space. The other thing that one of the other big areas, the clean energy tariffs, they were basically the size of those programs, the amount of megawatts that could be under those programs was doubled. The term NRS, NRES, that's non-residential energy solutions, and our the other one is our shared clean energy facilities program, SCEP. That's community solar. Other things that happened, there was a creation of a hydrogen task force where the Green Bank was named to be the chair. This was not something that we sought out, but we were something whenever the legislature says, hey, we would like you to lead on something, we're not one to say no. And this actually is a pretty exciting time to kind of really be looking at hydrogen and the way we can build out the manufacturing base of that in Connecticut. You look at what's going on with President Biden's infrastructure bill, there's a lot of opportunity there. You might have even read in the paper the use of the defense production bill recently to encourage clean energy deployment. And lastly, there's a effort coming out of New York State, this regional effort where DEEP is really a partner on, and the Green Bank will play a support level dealing with the expansion of hydrogen deployment. So it's kind of good timing. There's a lot going on in that space right now, and it's an exciting space for hydrogen right now. The other big kind of high level item that you're starting to see is on this Public Act 2255, ED storage and reliability. There really is kind of this policy shift from, hey, you know, battery storage, their time is now. And you see a lot of policies coming into place to encourage battery storage. And one of the great things about battery storage, right? So when we encourage residential solar on rooftops, you know, that obviously is a benefit to the grid and there's a benefit to the homeowner. But with battery storage, you're seeing a much greater benefit not only to the homeowner but to the grid and grid reliability. So that we see that as a very exciting step as you can see what's happening with battery storage, of what happened with solar deployment as the cost came down, the deployment went up. Lastly, for the slide, there was an exemption for new nuclear from a moratorium that was already in place. Nothing, you know, we're not going to start playing in the nuclear space. I wish we could, but we don't. We have millions of dollars. We don't have billions. Next slide.
And we can't statutorily because it doesn't meet our clean energy definition, but yes.
Yeah. Another good point. So the Connecticut Clean Air Act, this was like the huge aircraft carrier clean air legislation from this past session. Really exciting stuff occurred in it. The electrification of our state fleet. One area where we played a central role was with electric school buses, where basically there was this kind of unknown state municipal contracting requirement, which basically said, hey, listen, for your schools to go out and contract for their school bus fleets, they need to do it, within 5 years. And we looked at that and said, hey, this doesn't really make sense when you look at how we're trying to get greater adoption of electric school buses, because the cost of those school buses, for the initial purchasing, is much higher. It's a higher cost. But over time, the operational and maintenance cost is obviously much lower. So it was like, we need to go out with longer terms of contracting to really make that work. And so we worked very much to make sure that was included in the bill. And then another thing that occurred was, so going back to the days that we were swept, there was, I thank Commissioner Klee and Deep in basically assisting us and saying, hey, listen, we know you're in a tough spot. We're going to try to work this so that we can get some additional RGGI money to the Green Bank to make up for that. We looked at that with other issues going on right now with being able to pay for certain EV incentives, and we kind of worked through the various stakeholders, say, hey, listen, when we have RGGI overages collections, we can put them towards those EV incentive programs, and at the same time, the Green Bank can play a greater role in hopefully getting EV adoption up. Brian, why don't you jump in? What else are we missing on the Connecticut Clean Air Act and the state budget implemented that we should be talking about?
Cool. Just a quick clarifier that was actually Deputy Commissioner Dykes at the time who came up with the solution that some board members might recall back in 2014 when we lost some RGGI funds because Commissioner Esty at the time had suggested that he would competitively raise money to fill the budget deficit by competitively offering residential customers into the market. And when that didn't fall through, or when that didn't come through, the governor needed other sources of revenue, and they came to us for RGGI. But Commissioner Dykes came up with Deputy Commissioner Dykes at the time, a really creative solution to filling the void there. So that's just a little bit of back history on what Brian was referring to before. But just bringing us to where we are. So we've always been supportive of RGGI maximizing greenhouse gas emission productions per dollar of allowance proceeds. We have invested our proceeds primarily, I think, over 50%, if not over 60%, in state lead by example projects, solar on state facilities. We've worked with the ECD on manufacturing facilities. So we've put our RGGI funds into CPACE and lead by example projects historically. But as we know, transportation is the #1 greenhouse gas emission sector in the state of Connecticut. One of the things that happened with this bill is that it changed the definition for how we use RGGI allowance proceeds. So historically it was, we can use them for class 1 resources. It's now aligned to our clean energy definition. It does not include any fossil fuels within our clean energy definition, for example, fuel cells, but does allow alternative fuel vehicles and associated infrastructure. So to Brian's point, we now, board might recall that, over the last 5 years on average, we've received $3 to $5 million a year in RGGI allowance proceeds. Recently, prior to this year, it was about $5 to $6 million a year. As a result of the cap coming down and allowance prices going up, it's likely that this fiscal year will receive anywhere between 10 to 11 million of RGGI proceeds. So what we worked on here with Commissioner Dykes and the legislative leaders of the Environment Committee was that anything over our recent average RGGI proceeds would go towards supporting electric school buses with a focus on environmental justice communities. So we want to see those proceeds go towards things that hit our greenhouse gas targets, but primarily that take our kids safely to school in transportation systems that reflect our values. So we've been involved in a PURA docket now. We're going to be much more actively involved in a PURA docket 21-09-17, which has to do with medium and heavy duty vehicle electrification infrastructure. So now that we've got this RGGI investment going to vouchers for electric school buses to deep through cheaper, we're going to become actively engaged in this market, because the 8,000 school buses that we have in Connecticut are all primarily diesel, like 99.9%. The public policy now is 100% of those school vehicles by 2030 in environmental justice communities need to be zero emission, and 100% in all communities by 2040. So that market is nearly $3 billion of additional investment beyond the conventional diesel powered buses. So we know we need to bring the green bank model to help the state achieve this ambitious target, because the federal infrastructure stuff is not anywhere going to be enough to make this change happen. So we're going to become very active participants in enabling private capital to flow in this market. So that was a long description of what's happened here, but happy to go in deeper. I'll turn it back to you, Brad.
All right, perfect. No, and that's it. Unless anyone has any questions, we can move forward with the agenda.
Lonnie, Laura, I do have a question for Brian. Hi, Brian.
Yes, go.
Exempting new nuclear from the moratorium. I missed it when you went over that.
Oh, so
It's just what it says.
yeah, and I think this really relates to Dominion and potentially allowing for additional small nuclear at their site is the likeliest scenario. So I don't see much new small modular nuclear going up around the state, but I think this does enable this to potentially occur at the Dominion site.
And so now it does.
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
And this is Lonnie, and Dominion is still producing what? Is it 55% of our electrical generation? I mean, it's the biggest generator in all of New England, right?
Correct. I don't. It's that number's come down, but it's still a huge number, and it's. I mean, if your number one concern is climate change, my personal opinion is it's hard to be anti-nuclear.
Yeah.
There's a strong connection between this bill and the 1.3 above it, Public Act 22-5, the zero carbon electric sector by 2040. Nuclear hypothetically would make up 50% or more of that target, including offshore wind. So it is an important all of the above strategy to zero emission baseload clean energy.
So totally agree with you. And I need to have other fuel sources to provide electricity. So
yeah, no, I love it. The folks who want to shut it down, so, oh really?
We've been there.
We've been there. Oh, many times, many times. I have one other question too about the hydrogen study task force. Avangrid made a big announcement, I think it was last year, maybe 2021, 2019, that they were they wanted to build an electrolyzer green storage facility, hydrogen storage facility in Orange. And has that moved forward, or are they discussing this with us as we talk about our regional plan going forward? Are they a collaborative element to this?
So we haven't had a conversation with Avangrid on that transaction specifically. Avangrid is likely to have one or more seats on the task force. The legislative leaders have to identify representatives, and I'll talk about it in a second, the composition. But I did have, thank you to Brenda Watson, who introduced me to Frank Reynolds, the CEO of Avangrid. We gave him a tour of our building here, our campus here at the Nonprofit Center. And it was just a great opportunity to connect. I feel like Avangrid is a really progressive, forward-thinking company, and that we're going to be able to identify a lot of opportunities to work together, which in the past, has been okay, but not, to the tune of what we need to achieve here with, the zero carbon electric policy and, 100% electric school bus stuff. I feel like, they're much more in tune now with that sort of stuff. So to be determined. We've got a meeting with them and their staff this summer to kind of strategize together, and I will raise that, Lonnie. That
That's
point.
good news. And I know they're heavy duty in Canada too. I mean, they're really an international company. And, you know, it's good to have them on the team. That's great. Okay, then moving on to, do we want to discuss committee recommendations on the Budget Operation and Compensation Committee? I think Eric and Jane we're going to talk about.
Actually, just quickly, I just wanted to go into a little bit more detail, if I could.
Oh, okay, sorry.
No problem at all. On the Hydrogen Study Task Force, just to give board a more sense of what Brian was alluding to in terms of the invitation from the Energy and Technology Committee leads. You know, obviously, as we all step back and we look at Connecticut, you know, our small state, I like Brian saying that we always punch above our weight. But we definitely have a supply chain in Connecticut that is important not only to our region, but also the nation. You know, we've got a lot of nonprofits on the ground. I love this map. This is a map that the Connecticut Center for Advanced Technologies put together with the Hydrogen Fuel Cell Coalition that identifies the end uses for hydrogen in fuel cells in our state. But we have a number of great institutions, the Center for Clean Energy Engineering at UConn, a lot of small companies along the hydrogen supply chain, and then of course our fuel cell companies. I had no idea that going through this that Doosan was renamed here. So it's for those of you who aren't following this, High Axiom is now the fuel cell company out of South Windsor. It's a Doosan company. They renamed it. So you know, we're excited by this. We've got for those of you who've come to our building here in Hartford, you'd see that we've got a green hydrogen room, just kind of featuring this importance to the state in terms of manufacturing. But just a little bit of bias there. But you know, the special act that creates the study, so it establishes the task force, it sets the composition. I'll go through that in a second. And then by January 15th of 2023, the task force is to submit a report to the Energy and Technology Committee. So in terms of the task force, you know, there are 5 ex officio members of the task force. We're the chair of the task force. We've got Chair Gillette from PURA, Commissioner Dykes from DEEP, President Radinka from UConn, and Joel Reinbold from CCAT. But right now, our legislative leaders are filling in all those gaps there, and you can see, to the point we were talking about earlier, that there will be 6 representatives from the electric distribution companies. So 4 from the electric side and 2 from the gas side, that our legislative leaders on both sides of the House will be identifying and bringing forward. So we're working with them now. We sent them a list. They've got ideas themselves as well. We're just waiting for them to appoint with the hope that we'll be able to launch this on Tuesday, July 12th. And it's our expectation that we'll have a meeting a month of the task force, the second Tuesday of every month from 10 to 12. We want to move those meetings around the state so that we can showcase what's happening, you know, at some of the companies at UConn, just so we can do some education for folks along the way. But these are the 7 areas that the legislation has the task force addressing: regulations and legislation to support the scaled economy of the hydrogen ecosystem in the state. You know, looking at sources and uses, that's always the big question around hydrogen. You know, what's the source of energy producing the hydrogen? And then the end uses of hydrogen. So 1, 6, and 7, those tend to be the big ones, but there are a lot of other things in between. And the statute also allows other areas of study. What we want to do, in having a conversation with our ex officio colleagues earlier this week, we want to bring in environmental justice as a cross-cutting conversation in all of this, so that we're bringing voices of the community into it. And then secondly, as Brian was alluding to, the Defense Production Act, there may be something there for us to dig into legally, given the Biden administration's recent declaration of the DPA, which includes fuel cells, heat pumps, solar. It was intended to address tariffs, but also includes some of the technologies that we as a state care about in terms of manufacturing. So those are the areas that we're looking to address, and you know, happy for any board member to follow up, you know, seek your guidance as we're moving forward. But you know, step by step, it's another thing that we're adding to, you know, our efforts. Our teams are working really, really hard, but this, is really important to our state, and we are excited to support the E&T committee with this activity. Happy to
Okay,
take it.
any questions or observations on this, on the hydrogen task force issue? All right, hearing none. So let's move on to committee recommendations. It's from Budget Operation and Compensation Committee. And this really has to do with proposed targets and the budget for FY23. Another transition year, yet another transition year. And so I think Eric and Jane were going to talk to us about this. Eric and Jane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we'll start off with the targets, and then we'll talk about how we're all the resources that we need to achieve them. So starting with our incentive programs, we're setting targets at 1,460 projects for $34.9 million in capital, which should deliver us about 7.8 megawatts of installed capacity or nameplate. And this should bring or should avoid 6,500 tons of CO2 from being emitted annually and deliver 181 direct, indirect, and induced job years. Most of these are coming from the SMARTY program. It's been around for a while. We're very comfortable with this. And these numbers have been discounted a little bit, so I'm expecting us to beat them, being that we're have a special offer that's launching July 1st. We feel this is very achievable. In terms of the energy storage solutions, which make up the rest of the numbers, as you can see, all the projects we're forecasting will come from the residential side. While we do, as you all have heard, we do have a hopper filled with commercial and industrial projects. Those take a lot longer to actually get installed. So while those will start to hopefully be approved shortly, we don't expect those to actually come online. This is a little bit different way of counting projects than we've done in the past. We typically said, hey, once something is closed, for an incentive side, we said, hey, once the incentive is approved, it's closed, it's done. Just operationally, due to the nature of energy storage solutions, we're only recognizing those projects as towards our targets in terms of once they actually come online and are available for dispatch. So it's a more conservative approach altogether, but that's why we have that zero there, and I think we're comfortable with this. So moving on. Yep.
Just real quickly, this is Brian. The only thing I would add, board members, obviously have seen this, but what you don't see on here is the RCIP, right? We have been the administrators of the RCIP since it was passed as part of Public Act 1180, and then got expanded to 300 and then 350 megawatts. So we successfully achieved the 350 megawatts by the end of 2021, which was a year ahead of schedule. Our team just took a look at the last 5 per capita deployments in the residential sector, and in the entire Northeast for each of those 5 years, Connecticut had the largest per capita deployment of residential solar. So, a lot of these studies tend to aggregate everything together, but if you disaggregate it, you can kind of see what's happening. We also ran that up against the national numbers, and we're number 5 or number 6 behind California, Hawaii, Nevada, Arizona, understandably. So that's to say that great job to the team on implementing and executing the public policy target for the RCIP. Now our focus is really managing those assets, ensuring that they're producing the kilowatt hours that we expect, so that those SHRECs, get sold to the utilities for RPS compliance, and then we're able to recover our upfront and ongoing performance-based incentives and administrative costs. So our efforts now turn to asset management as opposed to customer acquisition. So just wanted to make that point. You won't see it here because all the projects are up and running, but we are managing those assets because they are cash flow to the organization.
That's great, Brian. That's Matt. really an amazing accomplishment, by the way. And I think our incentive level was lower than a lot of those other states as well. Is that right?
That's right. I want us to take a look at that in an EM&V study, but you look at what other states in the region have done. A lot of them have provided tax credit benefits, upfront on top of the ITC. They have provided higher rec-based incentives. So I'd really like us to take a look at that, because I think not only on a per capita basis we were effective, but I think we are also efficient with ratepayer resources too.
So moving on to the financing programs. As a whole, we're proposing that we'll approve and close 882 projects for $64 million in change, which should bring us an installed capacity of 7.6 megawatts. These will avoid 48,000 tons annually of CO2 and will create 566 direct, indirect, and induced job years. The big thing, this is in line directionally with what we've achieved and what we've set targets for in recent years. The big thing to note is the capacity target is lower, and that's due to us not setting a capacity target around CPACE. We were creating a little bit of a strange incentive to pursue solar projects as opposed to energy efficiency projects. And the space being that we had a target around generation, but not one around savings. From an EM&V perspective, it's been on my plate for a couple of years to look at, is there a better way that we can come up with forecasts and ways that we can measure energy savings? And that's something that has bubbled up on the to-do list. And so we'll make sure that we achieve that this year so that we can continue to provide those targets and better forecast our activities, but also speak to the impact in more transparent terms. So you will notice the smaller capacity target there versus earlier years. Other things I'd like to highlight on here, CPACE continuing along with what we've been doing, continuing to work with our third-party capital providers. We have our PPA and roof lease product on there where we're working with some projects we develop ourselves. We're working with the state solar, our MAP offering, our marketplace assistance program, as well as third-party developers. SBEA, our partnership with Eversource, just signed a new agreement with them, and we're expecting that to bring us 839 closed loans next year. Multifamily, our focus, as it has been, is around, or as we kind of shifted gears last year, is around deploying the PPA in that space. So making sure that we can help the residents of affordable multifamily properties save through solar, and doing that through our existing PPA offering. We don't have anything in here on transportation. That's typically through our carbon credits. We're currently working on those numbers, but again, that won't lead to numbers of projects or capital deployed. That'll just be additional CO2 savings. And then strategic projects, we don't have anything in there, but we have budgeted an investment number. As we've seen for the past couple of years, it's kind of hard to predict what's going to fall into that bucket. I don't want to jinx anything and say, hey, the Groton fuel cell will close in a couple of weeks and fall in that bucket, because I think we would have said that a lot of times recently, but we're hopeful for that. I mean, this past year we closed on our investment with Butterfly, which went into this bucket. So we're confident that something will come down this road. We just haven't identified exactly what that will be yet. Any questions on targets before we shift to resources in the budget?
Maybe just a comment, Erica, a few following just the further items on, we're now in year 2 of the behind the meter non-residential energy solutions program, or what was the former ZREC LREC program. So everyone's still kind of feeling their way out. So I suspect that this also has a bearing on the CPACE project's targets here. And then the total PPA, we're probably still working on a few in the prior regime, just getting those across the finish line. But there's a lot of learning still going on and trying to figure out what our role is in that new marketplace. As Brian noted earlier, those targets doubled in both the SCEF and the NRES programs. Also on multifamily, like just Vicki and her team, the Department of Housing, Connecticut Housing and Finance Authority, the Green Bank, like just big. I don't want to give us all like a pat on the back, but like I feel like last year there was a big policy decision to include affordable housing as a residential participant in the behind the meter programs, which is a really important distinction because historically affordable housing had to compete in the ZREC, LREC auctions, and we know how hard that is in general, let alone affordable housing. So PURA took a lot of comments. They took guidance from us as agencies and just recently came out with the decision on affordable housing and what would constitute the type of housing that would now participate in the residential renewable energy solutions program. And why that's important is because it's not an auction format, it's a fixed price tariff, it's a high tariff. So there could be good economies of scale there that will deliver economic benefits back to the tenant. So again, we're feeling ourselves out here. The hope is that we'll be able to enable a lot of deployment in affordable housing across the state, working with DEEP and our other state colleagues. We've got a meeting later on today, but still feeling our way out here. We're optimistic that we'll be able to finally bring in tenants of affordable housing into the renewable energy market, as well as battery storage, because that will hitch right onto it.
Cool. Thanks, Brian. So shifting gears over to the budget. So key things I'd like to highlight in the budget: revenues year on year, we're forecasting a $2.59 million increase. This is due primarily to increased RGGI proceeds and additional REC sales. We also have our annual forecasted decline in receipts from from the utilities. We do that every year, that if we're doing our job, demand should cut and our demand should decrease and our proceeds from the utility should decrease. That, as I said, was offset by RGGI auctions, and as Brian mentioned, there's both increased demand and increased clearing prices. So that is, we're expecting a big gain there. And additionally, we have RECs from additional systems coming online. Those are primarily SHRECs that are subject to the master purchase agreement with the utilities. So very easily forecast in terms of what that revenue will be. In terms of operating expenses, we have a net year-on-year increase of $529,000. We have an increase in personnel operating expenses of $1.9 million. This is due to the merit increases that went through last year. We have $318,000 budgeted for COLA for the year. And then we have $600,000 for open and new positions. In terms of open positions, there's kind of a range across the board from we have an asset manager position, as Brian spoke to, our focus on the RSIP, as well as just kind of across the organizations, making sure that our investments are performing as we would like. And so having somebody dedicated to focus on that is really central to that plan. Other positions are the Director of Environmental Infrastructure, which I believe we intend to bring to the board for approval of that job description in July. We also are looking for somebody who can help us with continued community engagement. For those of you that were at the offsite, we talked about the need to bring communities along with us. And oftentimes for us to be brought along by those communities to achieve what their aims are. And so having somebody to really lead that effort for us is central to our efforts in terms of environmental infrastructure. But it won't hurt on the clean energy side of the house either. terms of incentive programs for non-personnel operating expenses, we're forecasting a decrease that's driven by the RSIP wind down and one-time costs occurred in this past fiscal year, such as the revenue grader meter updates. Well, that's still going on. We've been taking care of a lot of that last year. We also had some costs that were associated with the launch of energy storage solutions, so we have a decrease there. Financing programs, it's about flat year on year in terms of non-personnel operating expenses. Environmental infrastructure, we have an increase because, I mean, we were basically starting at nothing last year. We're staffing up, so we have the salary of the director, we have salary allocations from other staff, including this community outreach person, and then we have budgeted for some program launch costs. While we're still figuring out direction, we know that the one constant is there's going to be a need for some funding there. In terms of program incentives and grants, we have a year-on-year increase of 3.8 million. All things aside, like if you look at what we did last year programmatically versus what we're forecasting this year programmatically, we technically would have a decrease, but we're proposing here a $5 million incentive, which is contingent upon us identifying opportunities coming out of the federal government. And the intent, and Brian, feel free to jump in here because this is your baby, but it's my understanding is one of the ways that you unlock and attract federal grant funding is by states putting up their own money to say, hey, let's create some leverage. So basically, we wouldn't use this $5 million unless we're able to match it and leverage incoming federal funds to help us achieve some projects. Non-operating expenses year on year, we have an increase of 201,000. This is due to increases in our provision for loan loss. So just we're forecasting that we're going to add loans to the balance sheet, so therefore we need to increase our reserves. I believe looked like there was a question, or there was going to be a question with regards to that $5 million incentive.
Well, I'm happy to just clarify or provide additional context. I mean, as we all know, we're heading into a formula grant period where the federal government, through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, will be just allocating to states based on formulas a percentage of the large sum of money that came through that act. The other part is that they're starting to solicit competitive projects as well. And in a lot of cases, matches are a part of it, whether it's a 1-to-1 or a 1-to-3, $1 per match for the $3 of federal funding. So we just want some resources here to be able to put that into RFPs so that we can make Connecticut more competitive in bringing those federal dollars back to the state. You know, I'm often using the stat that, you know, our taxpayers contribute, you know, something like 2% to the federal government, but we only receive 1% back. So we got to find ways of bringing more of our dollars back home in supporting our green economy. So to the extent we can find opportunities that leverage those federal resources back to Connecticut, that's what we're after. Same thing for foundation funding. But obviously, as you all know, 1-to-1, we're not satisfied. I'm not satisfied with that. We're always shooting for 5-to-1, 10-to-1 leverage on every public dollar. So this is just a pool of resources that would be there to allow us to compete and win projects for Connecticut.
Are there
So
other?
I do have some questions on that, if that's okay, or just comment. Just as we work our way through, you know, both the formula funding and the competitive funding that's available through EJA, we should probably discuss this, Brian, and talk about the sort of competing requirements for those different funding sources and the places where we're going to need match money and who's eligible to apply for what. And, you know, to try to make sure that we have a coordinated approach for the programs that we're going to be applying for funding for. So I just want to flag that.
Yeah, no, totally agree. We've got like an update. We met with Commissioner Boughton of Department of Revenue Services, a really cool guy, interesting guy, who's overseeing Connecticut Built, I think, the bipartisan infrastructure law team, just to apprise them of kind of what we're doing. But yeah, let's definitely connect back, just on what's happening, where we can work together and the like. Absolutely.
Yes, Deep's responsible for implementing the formula funds for Connecticut. And, we expect the utilities to be applying for some of the competitive funding programs. So we should just make sure that we're putting our best foot forward and maybe not competing against each other. Although I think, having more than one application would be okay. I think it's going to be really important to make sure that we're all rowing in the same direction.
Great. So moving on to investments. So we are proposing to do $37.4 million worth of investment next year in terms of loans. So of that, I'll start at the top. We have an existing facility with Capital for Change. We're expecting them to draw $200,000 from that. We also have some multifamily term loans that are in the pipeline. That these are projects that the team has been working on for quite some time, and we expect to close, and then there to be draws on that facility for about 1.3 million and 1.4 million. Moving on to Posigen and our continued work with them, we're expecting a total of $4.6 million in terms of lending and then draws on those facilities with Posigen. We're expecting to use $7 million of our own capital towards CPACE projects. That's based off of what's currently in the pipeline and just general market activity. There's $8.3 million for state solar, so that's debt we would put into whatever fund that is or put into to support those projects. We have $1.3 million for PPA to developers, and then another 2.7 for additional PPA debt. So we have third-party developers have a vehicle but need somebody to put the debt into that to support those projects specifically. And finally, we have $3.7 million for SBEA. You'll see further down we have the Groton fuel cell for $3.2 million, and then we have our plug number of $5 million kind of reserved for additional opportunities that come up throughout the year that I spoke about previously. So using the Clean Energy Fund and RGGI proceeds, along with our other cash on hand, we'll invest this $37.4 million. Over the life of these loans, they'll deliver $12.9 million in interest income, and which gets us a weighted average return of 4.42% over 8 years. So that's exceeding our target that we set of 4% over a 10-year term. Any questions? All right, so that takes us to the resolution. And I just want to point out here, we don't have a formal recommendation from the BO&C committee due to just quorum at the last meeting, but we do have the members of the committee here who I'm sure, or I hope, would speak to support the budget and this resolution.
Do we have any observations or questions or?
Yeah, this is John Harity, and I'm chair of the budget committee. And I regret that we didn't have a quorum at the last meeting, but nonetheless, I think that there was enthusiastic support for the budget at the meeting before, and I personally want to thank Eric and Jane and everyone who worked on this. It's an incredibly complicated undertaking with a lot of moving parts, and as much as possible, they seem to have brought it in a realistic way that that works for us. So I hope that people will support the budget.
This is Adrian speaking. I think I'm the member who was absent because I had a problem in terms of scheduling that I did let them know about. But I do enthusiastically support the budget.
Thank you, Adrian.
Lonnie, this is Matt. Could I ask a question?
Sure.
I just wanted to check. I know that it's been looked at by the budget committee, even though they didn't have a quorum, but has this been looked at? Do all of the entities and all of the contracts and agreements in Roman 1 through 12, have they been looked at to make sure they comply with our procurement guidelines in terms of the value of the contracts, et cetera? I just am looking ahead to the state auditors and others. I think in the past we had one question on that. I want to make sure we don't get another one.
Yeah, that's a good point, Matt. So at the end of the day, what is the requirement for, and it's not a waivable requirement, is that all of those agreements you see, if they're over $150,000, need to go out through a competitive bid process. What we've done as a standardized process is we say, okay, for certain longer term contracts, that competitive bid process needs to occur every 3 years. So there should not be an agreement underneath this. That's why we say contingent upon a competitive bid process having occurred in the 3 years. So I believe all those are over 150, maybe not, actually almost all of them are, and any of them that do, they have to have the 150. So, and that's something we have.
The only exception is Inclusive Prosperity Capital.
Correct.
Yeah.
Is that because it's like a sole source type of acquisition, or why are they excluded?
Correct, because of the unique relationship there, and that's the one that we actually went to the ethics board to get the approval for and to set up. So that would be the reasoning. Now, I think after our our IPC relationship was it 6 years? I mean, at some point we cannot just sole source that in perpetuity, but I would think during that, the initial, we had a 3-year and another 3-year component of that agreement, but after that, we'd have to look to revisit of whether that, I don't think we would do a competitive bid in perpetuity for that, but at least for this, I think it's 6 years. Correct me if I'm wrong, Eric and Brad.
That's my recollection.
We would do a competitive bid process.
Okay, thank you.
This is Bettina. Just curious, what does Stark Raving do?
Stark Raving is the best name on this list. There are
It's so cool.
They're a marketing and media agency. We initially hired them to help us rethink our website, and our new website should be going live in the fall, hopefully sooner. And they also submitted through our RFP for a new marketing agency and came online this year, and we've been rather pleased with them. So
Terrific, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, do I hear a motion to approve resolution number 4?
So moved. It's Matt.
Thank you, Matt. Any second?
Second, it's Vicky.
Thanks, Vicky. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
That was an aye, right? Not an. And any abstentions? Okay, thank you. It's approved.
thanks.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Let's see.
Well, thank you for that approval of the budget and targets for the next fiscal year. Yes, lots of hard work goes into that, and now it gets harder. So just on agenda item 5B, so one of the things, so we have a lot of new board members, but just taking us back a little bit to pre 2017. So we used to provide the board with quarterly reports on our financial statements. Following the sweeps, our organization was just really stressed out in terms of the resources that we had. So we stopped doing certain things just to focus on what we needed to get done. We are providing, starting in Q1 of FY23, we're going to come back and provide those comprehensive set of financial statements, but realizing that you all are very busy people, and there's a lot of detail in those financial statements. We had a conversation at the ACG committee about coming up with an abridged version of those statements that could help you all as appointees, designees, to be able to communicate certain messages to your appointing authority. So we spent the last 6 months focused in on the 4 pieces that I'll talk about in a second that communicate key messages with the focus on the board. And then this year, this next fiscal year, we're going to dig in with our senior staff and come up with our own. We have been using dashboards, which have been really helpful to us, but we'll probably refine them a bit. We're going to develop some additional materials for our C4 stakeholders, our capital providers, our customers, our contractors, and the community at large, and then ultimately policymakers. So to be developed other items. But what we included in the package was an abridged version of what will be included in these quarterly reports. And they're really based around helping you all communicate 4 key messages. So the first one is that we're making an impact. You wouldn't have seen in the materials this, but I can tell you that we've got an incredible data warehouse, and Eric and Lucy and Carl and the team, our data team, have pulled together individual websites for each of you. So you will have our impact for your community that you live in. You'll have the impact for the territory that your appointer serves in. So if you're a governor appointment, you'll get statewide, you'll get vulnerable communities. If you are elected by a senator or a House representative, you will get their districts, so that if in the event you are meeting with them and want to communicate the benefit that the Green Bank has helped deliver in terms of investment, jobs, energy savings, we will have that there for you to just click on, and it's always updated, so it's always timely. So we will send those out to you in July. The second part, the next 3 things were a part of the materials. So the second key message is mobilizing private investment. That's fundamental to what we're about. I think, when we start to think about the 100% requirements of a zero carbon electric sector by 2040, the 100% electric school buses and fleets, and, just all the ambitious targets that we have, that, the Green Bank model recognizes that we need to mobilize more private, because the public taxpayer ratepayer isn't going to be able to foot the entire bill to get those things achieved. So what we've included here is effectively a balance sheet to show you the strength of our financial position. And then third is achieving sustainability. That's what we're after, is investing ratepayer resources, public revenues, to generate interest income that supports the operations over time, so that we are effectively not only getting greater deployment of clean energy around the state, but we're generating interest income that could cover the operations of the organization. So what we've included there is a profit and loss statement that shows you public revenues versus all revenues, earned revenues in terms of operating expenditures. And then lastly is just, we want to monitor the state benefit allocation. One of the challenges for us as a state is we have long-term structural budget challenges given pension and healthcare that we need to pay. So we've got a view in these sheets that shows what we pay beyond salaries to support the state in paying for dental, medical, retirement benefits. beyond what would be competitively sought in the market. So we're trying to show a gap here to say that, you know, we're obviously supporting all of this, but because we now have to incur 90 cents on every dollar beyond salary for this state fill, you know, we're bearing an additional burden. So we just need to monitor that because that affects our sustainability. So that's the final presentation there. And I just wanted to show you one. You'll get these trued up at the end of October or the beginning of November for the first quarter of fiscal year 23. That's our target release date. But this is an example of a P&L where we're showing through December of last year, you know, the earned revenues that we've come in, the actual, the budget, you know, compared against the operating expenses. You know, we obviously want earned revenues to cover our operating expenses so that we're pursuing sustainability. And then ultimately at the end, all revenues, you know, covering operating and non-operating expenses, you know, total expenses to show where our net margins are. So this is a presentation to show us how well we're managing our operations in a nutshell, and to help us communicate the point of sustainability that we're after. So this is one of the 4 examples. I don't want to go through all of them. What we will do is when we share our first quarterly report in fiscal year 23, is we'll go through it and we'll ask, you know, questions and see if you all are comfortable with how the financial reporting links up to the communication. You know, it was felt by the ACG committee that it was important to give the board members communication points built around actual data from our financial position. So that was it. I wanted to just present what's coming out of the ACG committee. I don't know if there are others who want to comment who are on the ACG or happy to take questions.
Lonnie, it's Laura. I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
On the making the impact reports, you have flexibility in sharing with us statewide information if we require it. I just think as an appointee of the Republican leader, he's probably going to not just be interested in his district. He's probably going to be interested in the state.
Great feedback. Eric, you got that? It's easy enough to bring in. Yes, Laura, we'll bring in the full state and your regions and the city in which you reside.
Yeah, and then if there are other custom views that people want to see, if somebody has a deep interest of seeing everything that's coastal or whatever that may be, just let me know. We have the ability to slice and dice.
That's good. And, you know, building on what Laura said, he's also been very engaged in the entire shoreline. And we've really done, back in the day when I was in the legislature, we really did a lot of collaborative work, bipartisan. And so, you know, I think it's really good, she makes a really good point to make sure we have all of that robust data available.
And he was an affirmative when we were first starting to form the Green Bank, when you guys were proposing it. He carried over the caucus on this because he was the chair of the finance committee. So I think from that perspective, whoever is representing the Senate or the House is appointed, or even the governor, you just want to let them know. The other thing too is our COGs have been extremely active, and they're working obviously collaboratively together because of all this infrastructure money. So just keeping 1 or 2 of them, you know, all of them informed somehow would be, I think, beneficial. I mean, I can do it for my COG and my MPO, but the others in the state, we're not by far, we're the smallest, so the others in the state might be interested too. That's my feedback. Thank you.
Excellent. Eric, that was great. Yeah. We got the COGs, but beyond the munis, let's go to the COGs. Yeah, that's great. Cool.
Okay. So moving on to agenda item 6A, incentive programs, updates and recommendations, and that's Sergio, I think. Sergio Carrillo?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Hi, Sergio.
Hello, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. This is Sergio Carrillo, Director of Incentive Programs. So we're here to seek approval of the process we're going to use to approve the upfront incentives in the Energy Storage Solutions Program. But first, I want to provide a quick update on where we are with the program, which will serve as a perfect segue into the approval process. So on the residential side, we have approved 9 applications totaling 137 kWs of capacity. We have an additional 99 applications totaling 1 megawatt under review. This is pending the technologies, the approval of the technologies, meaning Tesla and a couple other large developers. On the non-residential side, we have approved five projects totaling 4.6 megawatts of capacity, and we have 32 applications totaling 59.7 megawatts under review. And this is the primary reason we're here today. As you saw in the memo that we prepared for the meeting, we have a few non-residential projects with upfront incentives that are greater than $500,000, for which we will need board approval. So what we're going to do today is present the process that we're going to use for these approvals. Next slide, please. Yes. So about a couple months ago, I mentioned that we had depleted all the non-residential capacity, the 50 megawatts for the 2022-2024 cycle. And I also mentioned that we were going to go to PURA for additional guidance on how to move forward. PURA requested additional benefit cost analysis to be modeled for the next 100 megawatts of non-residential capacity. We must file these analyses by August 1st, presumably with the intent to open this capacity block, the 2025-2027 capacity block, sooner than initially planned. We'll see. We will keep you all updated. Next slide, please. These are the flow charts describing very high level the incentive application process and the project completion process. There will be 2 touch points with the board highlighted in green. The reservation of funds letter basically signals to the project developer that the Green Bank has reserved the funds for their project, and that there will be disbursed as long as the project is built and energized and all that. This is their official green light to proceed with the project. And then there is the confirmation of funds letter, which will be provided only after the project comes online. And it's a communication to the developer and the project owner, the facility owner, confirming the amount of the upfront incentive and our intent to proceed with the payment. The upfront incentive process that we're seeking approval for is as follows. And basically, we're mimicking the CPACE process. So since residential incentives are capped at $7,500, these incentives will be approved by Green Bank staff. But as I said before, many non-residential projects, they're very large, and many projects will qualify for upfront incentives greater than $500,000. We will bring those incentives to the board for approval. We will use a tear sheet, very similar to the one used in CPACE, describing or listing key characteristics and financial indicators of the projects. The board packets include a sample tear sheet of a real project, copies of all the documentation that we are collecting for the projects, and also a copy of the reservation of funds letter that we will provide to developers. We also intend to seek approval of this reservation of funds letter via consent agenda. Once the board approves, then we will issue reservation of funds letters. Finally, and prior to issuing the last confirmation of funds letter, we will notify the board, prepare a reconciliation by project showing the upfront incentive amount in the reservation of funds letter and the confirmation of funds letter, and with an explanation of any deviations. And we'll do this because the likelihood of these two numbers being different is very high. These projects are very large. There's no guarantees that the utilities will approve these projects. And I believe some of them will have to be very likely downsized to be able to receive interconnection approvals. So just to give you a quick example, we have there's a project that is a 7 megawatt battery. The hosting capacity, the ability of the distribution network to receive this project or to receive additional energy is 1.5 megawatts. So the project as proposed, there's no chance it's going to be approved. So the utilities can either reject the project, they can approve the project contingent upon doing some system upgrades that will cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, or the developer will downsize the projects to be able to to be absorbed by the distribution network, which is the most likely scenario. So anyways, that's the plan. And here we show the sections of the tear sheet. Again, please refer to the board packets. I put a full tear sheet in the packets. There is a section related to customer side project information. There is a section on program eligibility that will affect the incentive amount and what the battery owner can and cannot do with the batteries. There is a section describing the battery characteristics, make and model, the size, the power of the battery, interconnection, etc. Then there is a benefit cost analysis section, which is basically the societal benefits generated by the projects, of which the RIM, the number one, the RIM is of particular interest to Pura and to us. And finally, there is a section on the incentives per se, showing the estimated upfront incentive amount. Next slide, please. This is just a list of the documentation that we're collecting with each project application. You'll see a sample in the board packets. We're collecting a lot of information. All this is available to be shared. Next slide, please. And that's it from me. So I'll be glad to answer any questions before we proceed with the resolution.
Sergio, this is Lonnie. I'm just wondering, is there a drop dead timeline from going from reservations to confirmation? I mean, are they going to be able to sit on a reservation of funds
Yes.
in perpetuity, or are we going to cut them off if they're not making it happen?
Yes, excellent question. Yes, we are given 18 months for developers to complete the projects once we issue the reservation of funds letter. Some of these programs will probably have some issues meeting those 18 months, given that they're so large that they're triggering distribution studies by the EDCs. Some of them transmission interconnection studies that will take, we've been told by the utilities, between 9 and 12 months just for the study to complete. So some of these projects might have issues meeting the 18-month timeline.
Okay, thank you. I also want to point out, I think Matt is going to leave us at 10:30. Brian, do we have a quorum without Matt?
Yes, we still have a quorum.
Okay, good, good.
Yep.
Good, good. Any more questions or observations?
I have a question. I guess, Sergio, thank you for the presentation. Can you explain, so if they downsize the system, and I'm sorry if I missed this, is the cost benefit test run again to make sure that the new proposed system is still cost beneficial? And also, as far as the upgrades necessary to the distribution system to interconnect, those are the responsibility of the developer?
Yes, responding to the second one, yes, there's responsibility of the developer. What we've seen so far is developers owning these systems and offering what is called energy as a service to the customers. So yes, the developers will bear the cost of the interconnections. And related to the BCA, that is a great question. I would say yes, we would run them again just to ensure that the projects still add value.
And so part of the problem is that we don't know up front, because it's difficult to know what the interconnection costs are. And we see this problem a lot across all of our work on the electric grid, right? Is, getting estimates from the utilities can take a very long time. So I guess I'm just wondering, like, the efficiency of having sort of two runs at that, if there isn't a way to better deal with that, but that might be a larger issue. I mean, because once they get to the point of knowing what the interconnection fee, they're sort of partway down the road and have spent some money, right? Any thoughts about, maybe there's some room for advocacy for solutions to that in some of the PURA dockets? I think, we have concerns about this for medium and heavy duty vehicle electrification as well, right? So just raising that as a general concern.
That's a great question too. Thank you. We're seeing that we're dealing with this issue on the solar side as well. The time to issue those approvals take, weeks and weeks or months. And there are conversations in the interconnection working group that PURA is leading. There are some conversations about these, about how to share the cost, how to make these more manageable for project owners. So it's an ongoing conversation. I don't have a straight answer. I'm sorry.
Yeah, nor do I. We're looking at it too. So, but I do want to raise it as, sort of as we deal with this issue more and more across all of our programs. But I would like some follow-up on how the cost benefit is analyzed once the interconnection fees are known and if the project is resized. Because that's the type of thing that we run into with projects that we procure sometimes, where changes are made along the way, and we always make sure to do a follow-up, to evaluate any costs associated with that or changes in the project cost benefit.
Fair enough.
Okay, any more? Or should I ask for a motion to approve resolution number 5? Do I hear a motion to approve resolution number 5?
It's Laura, so moved.
Thank you. A second?
Second from
Second.
Adrian.
From Adrian? Thank
Yes.
you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
I'm actually going to abstain. It's Vicky, just pending further information on the second round of cost benefit analysis.
Okay. Thanks, Vicky. So Vicky's abstaining. All righty. And so moving on, agenda item number 7A, I believe that's Bird.
Yes, it is, Madam Chair.
Okay, would love to hear from you.
Sorry, I was just getting my my microphone set. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Great, perfect. This line of credit, which we are bringing to the board for renewal, has actually been in place in one form or another since the middle of 2018. The original facility was closed in June of 2018, and it was in connection with a payment that the Green Bank needed to make to the state budget coffers related to the sweep that was put into place in 2017. So we were able to put this facility together with two Connecticut banks, Liberty Bank and Webster Bank. It was groundbreaking at the time. We were not aware of a revolving credit facility that actually used renewable energy credits to secure a line of credit for anyone, and we were able to put that together with Liberty and Webster, and we really appreciate that they stepped forward at that time. Since then, we have in that original facility, which was in the amount of $16 million, was drawn 100%, at that time and repaid with our first green bond that was issued in April of 2019. And subsequent to that, when we moved to our Green Liberty bond, this facility has been renewed annually. So this is a straightforward renewal of a facility that is currently standing at $10 million. We propose to reduce the size to $5 million to somewhat economize on some of the fees associated with the facility, and some of the changes that are related to this facility are in the interest rate category, with the phasing out of LIBOR, the London Interbank Offered Rate, to the secured overnight financing rate, or SOFR. That is, we're retaining the same spread over the base rate, but we're changing to this new benchmark that has been established since LIBOR is phasing out. As I said, the facility size is being reduced to $5 million from $10 million. The upfront fee is $75,000. The unused fee is unchanged at 0.5%. So our expenditure over the year, if we do not use the facility, will be about $100,000. It's pretty straightforward, and I'm happy to entertain any questions from the board about this. On the next page is the flow of funds. It's not really necessary to walk through that in any detail, but just to show that the security for the warehouse is contained in an SPV called Shrek Warehouse 1. And if we were to borrow, we would have to certainly, even if we don't borrow, when we issue bonds against tranches 5 and 6 of the Shrek, we would have to release that collateral, which we have done in the past, which are the Shrek receivables, and place them under an indenture for the Green Liberty bonds. So next page, please. Next slide. That will have the resolution. There we go. It's quite lengthy. Bond counsel had to review this, as well as bond counsel has reviewed this in the past, but we also had the lenders counsel review this, so that it is perfectly fine for our purposes. If there are any questions, I'm happy to entertain them at this time.
Okay, hearing none, do I hear a motion to approve resolution number 6?
This is ridiculous. I've got this time.
So moved, John Harity.
Thank you, John. Do I hear a second?
This is Dominic, second.
Oh, thank you, Dominic. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? Okay, the motion is approved. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. All right, we're getting down to the wire here. I think we're going to make it. All the resolutions are wrapped up, so the rest informational. But just wanted to provide an update to the board on how we're doing on environmental infrastructure. We will come back to the board in July with the recommendation for the comprehensive plan. But in general, we're making steady progress. Ashley Stewart and I, who some of you met at our strategic retreat, have been engaging stakeholders over the last 9 months. We've focused a lot of our efforts on, nonprofit advocates, state agencies, private developers, academic institutions. As we look ahead at FY23, we're going to really turn our attention to municipal engagement. Hearing what the needs are of our municipalities, our COGS. Great point, Laura, there. So this is where we are just in terms of the areas of environmental infrastructure per the statute. This is our engagement cycle. We've effectively worked through agriculture, which is to say we've had, all of our meetings and write-ups and observations from Parks and Recreation, Land Conservation, and Ag. We're currently in water. At the end of June, we'll wrap up. We've got a few outstanding meetings on water. Then we're going to start to put pen to paper to write up our observations. And then we're looking ahead towards waste and recycling in Q1 of FY23, including an offsite visit to Quantum Biopower at the end of July. So we want to encourage board members to go and check out that food waste to energy project with us. We'll get you some more information there. Environmental markets, the last pink diagram there is really a cross-cutting issue. That includes carbon offsets and ecosystem services. But we feel between GHG emission reductions and climate resilience and adaptation, that since our mission is to confront climate change, that lens crosses everything, including our commitment to ensure that no less than 40% of investments in benefits inure to vulnerable communities per our statutory definition. So we've got a cross-cutting lens around climate change and vulnerable communities across these areas. So steady progress. Quantified Ventures is on here because we found them along the way. This is really one of those groups that speaks the language of green banks. And we've brought them on to help us do some translation of our findings into the language, that our staff would understand. So they actually did an environmental infrastructure 101 to our staff over the course of 2 hours, just to give them a sense of, the tools that we're using for clean energy are very similar for what can be used for environmental infrastructure. So they've been a great addition, to our team to help Ashley and I continue to make steady progress. These are our deliverables. We're going to have primers at the end of this process, which are really good snapshots of what's happening in each of these sections. As I tell Ashley, I feel like these are each master's thesis documents. They're like 25 to 30 pages that summarize the policies, the markets, and opportunities in each of these sectors. We included Parks and Recreation in this board packet. Last time we included Land Conservation. So we will have several of them ready next month, additional ones for folks to take a look at. I've already heard Commissioner Dykes cite one of the key references in our land conservation one, so she's taking a look at it too. We're also, as I noted, FY23, so water, waste, and recycling will be a focus for us there. Obviously, along the way, when we see opportunities that come up to compete, we will try to go after them. So one was, agriculture. We worked with agriculture, Commissioner Herbert and his team, really great. The ag stakeholders were really energized. So we came together with UConn in the Department of Ag to put together a $50 million proposal for climate smart ag in the state of Connecticut, which has to do with controlled environment agriculture. So when we see opportunities like that come up that are consistent, we're like, let's go after them. Just to see if we can position the state. And I included that application in the packet at the end. And then obviously we're going to continue to engage in relationship build. So local governments is going to be our next target, and vulnerable communities a continuous target for us. So that's the stakeholder engagement. On the strategic retreat that we had, we've got a few slides that I pulled from a draft summary report that our staff has pulled together. And I want to invite a few board members who are able to attend the strategic retreat to offer some thoughts as well as I move through this. But we had our retreat at the end of April, just after Earth Day, at the Bacanico Center in Tarrytown. The theme of our activity was, confronting climate change. That's front and center to our mission, but within the context of investing in environmental infrastructure. Bacanico is a really special place. In fact, it was back in October of 2002 when Governor Rowland and his team assembled there to develop the first state level climate plan. So lots of special memories at this location that have led to great results on confronting climate in Connecticut. We had an incredible group of participants. You can see here board members, staff members, to stakeholders across the environmental infrastructure spectrum. From nonprofit groups such as the Trust for Public Lands to the New York Federal Reserve. We literally had a lot of really diverse perspectives, but also we were intentionally diverse with our invitations in terms of gender, race and ethnicity, and expertise. I did take a look back at historical offsite strategic retreats, and you can clearly see that it's easy to just find names and bring them in, but if we start to think about inclusivity, it gets harder. But I think from it we got really great participation, great expertise. We're all better for it just in terms of that diversity, given the engagement of all those actors. We had a short pep talk. The governor gave some remarks at the outset that got the group kind of in the mindset. You could see everyone there. We had to follow strict COVID protocols. I'm happy to say that, knock on wood, there were no incidents of COVID as a result of this activity. I had a colleague in Michigan who did something similar, and over 50% of their attendees came out with COVID as a result. So we had to follow really strict protocols, as uncomfortable as it was, but we were still able to engage. This space offered us an opportunity to envision what Connecticut would look like in 2050 if we were able to encourage more private investment and unlock that investment in environmental infrastructure in our state. And it also recognized that this effort is going to require working together across organizations, across civil society, being nimble, in that the Green Bank was uniquely positioned for the state to accelerate this pace of change. We should be launching from our positions of strength. We take a lot of pride in quantifying and speaking about our impact, our E4 impact: environment, economy, energy, and equity. And we want to also be able to move beyond the quantitative, but also to tell stories. We need to be better storytellers in terms of what's happening as a result of this investment. We've got a very mission-driven staff that speeds up, the pace of change in terms of these markets and policies. And we have a clear role to play, being an intermediary between the policies that are passed in the legislature in the executive branch and the markets that are expected to drive investment to enable us to achieve those public policies. So we have an important role to play in this ecosystem. But also stepping back is, one area that we need to build on, because it's a weakness, is that we need to move beyond just informing and consulting with communities and working towards, collaborating with them and empowering them. So we had Ashley Stewart of Sustainable CT. She had her Sustainable CT hat on when she was at the strategic retreat, do a set of educational presentations, and we did some breakouts so that we can put ourselves in the shoes of vulnerable communities and try to envision what their needs are. So we really need to continue to build towards collaboration and empowerment as we increase community engagement. The group overall was kind of divided in terms of, going big versus being conservative. I feel like where we're heading is it's going to be a lot like Goldilocks. We're going to be just right. It's not going to be too hot, not too cold, but we're going to be right in the middle. And the budget that we just approved is right there. You know, some felt that we're ready to go. Let's build a staff. You know, let's hire staff to each of these areas of concentration and invest now. While others were like, you know, let's continue the research and engagement and not move so quickly to set such high expectations. I feel like where we're going to end up is, you know, steady progress, chipping away, being right in the middle with just right. In terms of our deliverables, to Eric's point, this will be coming to you next month. The Director of Environmental Infrastructure, I had noted prior that I was to get you that in October of last year. There was just no way we were ready, no way we could envision the responsibilities of this position had we not gone through all the effort we have over the last 9 months. I feel like we're really ready now. We've got a great draft that we're circulating and look forward to having that conversation on that position description next month, and then going out and finding this special person to join the team and to help us realize and create this vision. The mission statement, we grappled with that. There'll be some proposals for us to take a look at the next meeting, and then we will provide a report out from the Pecanico meeting. And I'm just going to keep going, and then we'll stop at the tail end here. So we are working towards, you know, a comprehensive plan. This is our comprehensive plan from FY20, you know, where we took a lot of our offsite strategic retreat engagement to build a focus and a vision for the organization. One was a recognition that we had to engage citizens more in our activity. So green bonds and citizen bonds became very important for us. Green Liberty bonds, green Liberty notes is kind of the outcome of that activity. But green bonds us, the environment unites us. It can serve as a way of addressing our equity issues in society today. So that kind of became the framework of our comprehensive plan. We're going to take a step back and dig a little bit into this and come back with some thoughts for you all next month. And these are our next steps. I got 2 slides here. So today we got the FY23 budget approved. We'll present the comprehensive plan next month. We've got some new hires to make. The primers will be coming out. We've been kind of spacing them out to you, but we'll give you a few more next month. And then our hope is to wrap all of those up by the end of the year to serve as what you need to know on environmental infrastructure. To Eric's point on the whole consultants and strategic advisors, we will work to RFQ, to request for qualifications for consultants to support this new Director of Environmental Infrastructure as needed to provide technical assistance. We're looking to work with CIRCA, the Connecticut Institute for Resilience and Climate Adaptation, to include some of their climate change vulnerability index and social vulnerability index data into our warehouse so that we can see where some of the risks currently reside in terms of the investments we've made and how we think about investments going forward. We're going to continue to identify IIJA opportunities. Thank you all for your support on Smarty. You know, we haven't made much progress yet in terms of assembling recommendations for the deployment committee, but we're putting those things in resources in place to begin to think about them. So that will be a part of FY23, is enabling the Smarty loan to support environmental infrastructure. CPACE, as Brian noted, got expanded to include resilience. So Mackie, Elise, the team, Peter are all working on expanding that our CPACE program, and we'll be coming back to the board with observations and recommendations later. Community engagement, obviously really important. Waste and recycling will be our focus, local governments and community-based organizations with a focus on vulnerable communities. And then lastly is just professional development. You know, we did do an environmental infrastructure 101 to our staff as a lunchtime brown bag. We had really good attendance, really insightful questions, but also our staff can go out and do professional development. So I think Bert and Sergio are heading out to a conservation finance boot camp. I'm excited by that and how they, you know, will apply the lens of finance to land conservation. So that was a lot. Why don't I stop there? You know, if there are board members who have comments on the strategic retreat, that would be great, or any questions, comments.
This is John. I thought the strategic retreat was really well organized, and there was great discussion. There were great participants. I got a better understanding of how the expansion of the mission should not overwhelm what we're already doing, which gave me some, it helped me appreciate it better, and also not to be so worried about what the expansion might do. So I think the retreat was well done, and I got a lot out of it.
This is Adrian. I don't know if you can hear. Yeah, something strange happened with this little icon. This is my first retreat, so, and I'm a relatively new board member because I'd never been on one before. And I think that the idea of having a lot of different points of view and people from different walks in the life that we're leading here really paid off. I was really impressed by the diversity of experience, which led to, really, really in-depth conversations about where we're going and why and how we can address some of these newer challenges that Pure has dropped on us. And I think that it was really a great learning experience. I hope that we can follow up with some of the people that we met there because I'd love to be able to speak with them again.
Yeah, this is Lonnie. I agree. I also think that it really showed, one of our incredible strengths is that we have the ability to be a facilitator, to bring disparate groups together who are out there in the real world doing this stuff or trying to do this stuff, and to kind of bring them together and to have collaborative opportunities. And it was so clear, which it was very encouraging, how respected the Green Bank is and how they were really looking to us to kind of help pull all of these different elements together. So I think, that's an important lane that we have for us going forward. And I thought it was very successful.
Yeah, this is Dominic. I wanted to just echo what Lonnie just said too, and I think that was one of the sort of takeaways that came out of the retreat, as well as just the Green Bank's role as a sort of trusted broker between all these groups, and that, for me, the rollout of a lot of this is going to lean especially on that particular strength, and and initially less on specific financing that we do or help to encourage, but really about coordinating and collaboration amongst all the different agencies that are already doing work in this area, and all the private sector folks who are starting to do work in this area, and that's a real value add that we can provide.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that feedback. It was a tiring but inspiring strategic retreat, and now we just have to pull it together and in our comprehensive plan next month. So thank you all again for attending and providing your insights and giving us guidance. Yeah, so we're getting close to the end here. On other business, one quick thing, and then I'm going to turn it over to Adrian. So we were talking about it a little bit earlier with Bureau Chief Hackett on the bipartisan infrastructure law. So we had a meeting with the DRS Commissioner Mark Boughton, the former mayor of Danbury. For those of you who haven't seen the John Oliver skits with him, it's quite funny. But initially, we wanted to talk to them about our impact metrics, because historically we worked with DRS, Commissioner Jackson, back in the day on developing our tax revenue estimates. So we were able to work with Commissioner Boughton's team here, Eric, on our updated tax revenue calculator. So they were great there for us, so they'll help us there. But he brought his team here to our new office at 75 Charter Oak Ave. He loved the office space, loves our mission, what we're trying to do. Even went so far as to encourage us to use him and his social media to get our word out. If you look at him, he's got a lot of followers, but really interesting guy. What we wanted to express was the need for somebody to help us track opportunities. We're we're up on listservs, but we don't get everything that comes through. And just as an example, Bert and I were at the New York Fed last Friday, and it was only because we were there that we heard that the DOE Loan Program Office that had just presented to our board, 2 months ago, was issuing a request for information. And had that not been noted there, we would have not been able to now prepare for our July 12th comments or July 1st comments into the DOE. So we felt like we wanted to communicate to him, like, Commissioner, we just need somebody to track and be a net to catch stuff that we don't catch. They want to play that role for us, but I still feel like we need to articulate all the different things, from clean energy to ag and environmental infrastructure where we want to compete. Grant writing, they're interested in providing us some support there. The board just approved of resources for hiring a grant writer. I'd much rather not go through the process here of doing that, but rather working with DRS to do that, or DEEP, to do that in the context of helping us identify opportunities across the board on clean energy and environmental infrastructure. And then, coordination, just how are we all thinking about, yes, the formula grants coming to the state, but then also competing across the country. Which leads to, let me just turn it over to Adrian on Communities LEAP.
Thank you, Brian. There's a good reason that Brian can turn it over to me about opportunities in DOE, and especially LEAP, is because Brian is kind of the match and flame that lit our passion down in Bridgeport to go into a planning process for our energy development over the next few years. It's interesting to note that Bridgeport has had a lot of programs and projects in energy conservation and renewable energy, but have kind of, passed to the background in the last few years, and are trying to wake up now that, the entire country is looking at, what kind of energy developments are needed. So we applied to the DOE in the Communities LEAP program with a lot of help from Brenda and Brian and folks down here. We pulled all that together and applied as a nonprofit that's on the street corner in Bridgeport and has a lot of connections to the community. And at first they told us, well, no, we weren't part of the initial 22 communities across the nation that received this technical assistance support. But Brenda said, why don't we find out from them what was wrong? Because we thought we had a great proposal. And sure enough, during the conversations that Brian and Brenda attended with me, we were able to show that, yes, Bridgeport indeed was ready to do this technical assistance work and get a good energy plan underway. And they said right then that they would try to find a way of doing this with us. And a couple of weeks ago, I got a call from them saying that we were accepted into the program, that we were the 23rd community across the United States to be accepted. And of course, we had lit a lot of firecrackers in joy, because this is going to we're really going to be able, with this technical assistance, to pull together a great plan for Bridgeport. The photo shows all the folks who are involved, including some very exciting people that you guys know. Ashley's there, Brian's there, Brenda's there. So we have a great group that has already started to pull together the community under kind of an umbrella organization that we call Bridgeport Regional Energy Partners, that include both those who are producers and are in the energy manufacturing sector, as well as community members. So we're 42 strong, 43 strong now, and with this DOE behind our backs, it's a lot of wind, we're going to be able to move forward. So thank you, Brian, for pushing us into the fire.
Oh yeah, no. There's so much you learn. First of all, just working with Brenda and Adrian on this and Ashley on this was just very fun and inspiring. But I mean, you and Brenda taught me so much going through this. in terms of that additional step, that persistent step of, even in spite of the DOE telling us we weren't among the winners, you were like, let's discover why. And I think that step of persistence is exemplary of the environmental justice community. Like, not everyone knows to take that step because, when the DOE issues these RFPs, the language is labby, right? It's federal labby. So, to give a place for you all to talk about it in your own words, I felt like was just genius. And the persistence was fantastic. Literally, this program, Communities Leap, is the Biden administration's environmental justice program for Department of Energy. And Shalonda Baker created it. She oversees it. And it's just awesome to see, Bridgeport, a Phoenix Rising, be a winner amongst all the others across the country who applied.
Well, thank you for pointing us in the right direction. And I might say that we learned a great deal also. We're already pretty hard-headed, so the part about going back and explaining yourself even more did not seem strange. However, now going forward, the coordination and working with the community to build a plan that's bottom up instead of top down is really going to be exciting. And we're now looking for financing to be able to bring on all the staff that's needed to actually reach out to the community. And so we've already started, and we're going to be continuing and building a real design. And we hope Ashley and Brian can continue to help us with that, because a design for community outreach today is probably not the same design that we would have had 5 or 6 years ago. Things have changed a lot. The community has changed a lot, and how you connect with people has changed a lot. So we are on the cusp of learning more.
Including today, we have a community benefit agreement webinar. John, we'll send to the board. If you want to attend later on this afternoon, feel free to join. But we've got a CBA presentation today. So good stuff. Congrats.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, this is John. I wanted to point out that the Connecticut Roundtable on Climate and Jobs has been very involved in the Bridgeport project, from bringing the offshore wind to Bridgeport to we're now working on an initiative for carbon-free renewable schools.
Yes, and we're collaborating already with them to find a community outreach person, and we're on the point of signing an MOU to share this person, because the person will basically have the same mission for both organizations.
So this is Lonnie. It's so interesting how life is, that the way you were brought into the to the final acceptance, that actually probably makes you a lot more memorable to them. It's going to have a bigger impact, because number one, they blew it, and now they know it. And you showed up, and you were gracious and charming and just wanting to know. And this is great. This is perfect. Bravo.
We got a chance to defend the thesis that our community was worthwhile in terms of the investment aspect. And I think that's, they start out by saying we hadn't shown that in the proposal. We thought we had, but I think saying things aloud and being face to face often is very different. You can say exactly the same thing, but written down does not have the same resonance. So it was really a great idea to have that conversation with them. And everybody on the team attended. So all of them know us now.
That's great. Excellent. Okay, well, that looks like we've come to the end of our agenda. Anybody have any questions, observations, concerns? So I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
Thanks, John. A second?
Second.
Who's that?
Adrian, I'm sorry.
Oh, thank you. No, I just have... Okay, thank you, everybody. This meeting is adjourned. Have a great weekend, and this was a very productive meeting. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.